Chag Sameach.
Hasameach.
I probably should use this, right? Chag Sameach some more. Okay. I want to start by reading a little bit in the book of Ruth. Ruth. So turn with me to the book of Ruth in chapter 1. Okay. Ruth 1, we're going to go verse 1 through 18. Back in the days when the judges were judging, at a time when there was a famine in the land, a certain man from Bethlehem went to live in the territory of Moab. He had his wife, and 2 sons. The man's name was Elimelech. What does Elimelech mean? You had Melech, and there's Eli before him. What does that mean?
God is my king.
My God is king. My king is my God. His wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Machlon and Kilion. They were Ephraim from Bethlehem in Yehuda. They arrived in the plain of Moab and settled there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. Elimelech died. And she was left alone, she and her 2 sons. They took wives for themselves from the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. They lived there for about 10 years. Then Machlon and Kilion died, both of them. And the woman was left with neither her 2 sons nor her husband. It's a pretty sad story so far, right? So she prepared to return with her daughters-in-law from the plains of Moab. For in the plain of Moab she had heard how Adonai, Hashem, had paid attention to his people. To his people. It's interesting. So we know who his people are here. By giving them food. So let's pause a moment. So she planned to return with both daughters-in-law. That was her plan. You notice? To return to God's people. She left the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law and took the road leading back to Yehuda. But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, each of you go back to your mother's house. So even though she planned to go back with them, then she stops. Is this a test? Do you think this is a test? She planned to go back with them, but now she stops and says, go back to your mother's house. May Adonai show you grace as you did to those who died and to me. May Adonai grant you security in the home of a new husband. And she kissed them. But they began to weep aloud. They said to her, no, we want to return with you to your people. Naomi said, go back, my daughters. Why do you want to go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb who could become your husbands? Go back, my daughters. Go your way, for I'm too old to have a husband. Even if I were to say, I still have hope. Even if I had a husband tonight and bore sons, would you wait for them until they grew up? Would you refuse to marry just for them? No, my daughters, on your behalf, I feel very bitter that the hand of Adonai has gone out against me. Again they wept aloud. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth stuck with her. But Ruth stuck with her. She said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her God. Go back after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, "Don't press me to leave you and stop following you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May Adonai bring terrible curses on me, and worse ones as well, if anything but death separate you and me." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. We read the book of Ruth, on Shavuot because it's the season of harvest. This is a tradition. It's the Megillah that is read on Shavuot. Yeah. We talk a lot here. We talk about the tree of faith. We talk about Israel being the tree of faith and how branches are broken in. In this story, we have a natural branch, right? Naomi is a natural branch. And then we have two people, Ruth and Orpah, right? Ruth is grafted in, you could say. You see? And Orpah's a little different. She cried. She wanted to go with her mother. She said. But somewhere along the line, she gave up. So there's no book of Orpah, right? No book of Orpah. Gave up. But there is a book of Ruth. What's special about Ruth? What did she do? How is it that her grafting took? What was going on with Ruth? When Ruth came to Naomi, when Ruth stuck with Naomi, it was a little different. One of them left her old ways. One of them didn't just talk about it, but she left her people. One of them embraced a whole new life with Israel. One of them was grafted in, and one of them ultimately rejected the grafting. There are commentators who talk about Ruth as being a symbol of the believer. Maybe they use different terminology for believer, right? I think both of those people are symbolic of people who come to Messiah and some get it and some don't. We were talking about earlier about the Romans, the tree of faith, and how I was just reading this week that there's a passage where, there's some farmers who were giving information about this passage from what they knew, and there are, I don't know if you know this, you could have an apple tree, right? You could have a pear tree. The pear tree is doing very badly. The pear tree looks like it's going to die. But there are a couple of branches that look pretty decent. So you could take a branch off of a pear tree and you can graft it into the apple tree. And the branch will live and the tree won't reject it. But here's that may sound a little weird at first, maybe, well, okay, right? But you know what happens when it comes time for the fruit to be born with that branch? It still produces pears. It's grafted into an apple tree, and it still produces pears. Figure that out. That's amazing to me. Anyway, what does that mean? What does that mean in that analogy? right? That branch, that pear branch, it would have died in its old tree. But being grafted into that other tree, that apple tree, it was able to live, to flourish, and to become all that it was meant to be. And you know, there's a reciprocal blessing. The tree is stronger for those branches that are grafted into it as well. Did you know that? The tree becomes stronger. And it becomes all that it was meant to be. It flourishes, right? I think that's a lesson for us. I think that's part of the analogy in the Romans 11 passage. You're grafted in doesn't mean that you change, your DNA changes, but you are part of the tree. And it's a blessing for everybody. It's a reciprocal blessing. And everyone's better for it. But there are some branches you try to graft them in and they reject the grafting. And what happens when a branch rejects the grafting? It dies. I wonder whatever happened to Orpah. I don't know. Well, the message tonight is short, but it's very important. I know because I know the person who's going to give it. You. You're going to give it again, just like earlier today. So please tell me. This is a little more vague, these questions maybe, than earlier, but what is it to be a follower of Yeshua? Tell me. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you to be a follower of Yeshua? What does that mean in practical terms? Anything.
To follow his teachings.
Follow his teachings.
Where he governed himself.
Where he governed himself.
To obey Yah's commandments.
Obey God's commandments. Because that's how he lived. A heart that's yielded to the Holy Spirit. We want to make sure we've got something on the end that yielded to what? Right? What is it supposed to look like? What is that life supposed to look like? Love. How does a life look like love? What kind of things happen in that life that it looks like love? Yeah, take care of people. Express that love. When they need food, give them food. Isn't there a passage also, that it says that, but it prefaces it, right? It's not don't just say, oh, well, bless you. You need food? Oh, bless you. I'll pray for you later and go on your way while they starve. No. You have the means of help them, right? We can't help we can't feed everybody, but we can help people God puts in our path. We can help people He puts in our path. Next question. Along those same lines, what is it supposed to look like? Are we supposed to merge into society? And what does that mean to you? Of course, it could mean different things. Are we supposed to merge into society? To not be conformed to the things of this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind. There were some people in the early years, right, who snuck off into the desert. They said, we can't be in the world. And they snuck off into the desert to live. They're called the Desert Fathers. Didn't want to be part of society. because they were followers. Is that what we're talking about? No. So what are we talking about? What do we mean when we're not to be? Be in the world, but not of the world.
We've got to operate in it, because we've got to spread the news.
You can't tell anybody the news if they're not around.
Yeah. Be
Right?
light. Be light, not darkness.
Be light, not darkness. You could be a light out in the desert, but who's going to see it there?
Exactly.
Imitating Yeshua the way he lived.
Imitating Yeshua the way he lived. So he was among people almost all the time. He got a little tired of them sometimes. He had to go run on the way on the top of the mountain, right? Oh, give me strength. Right?
Take the message to anybody. Yeshua talked to tax collectors and sinners, so take Yah's message of salvation to everybody.
He didn't avoid anybody, it seems like, right? Sometimes people tried to shield him from they tried to shield him from children over here, they tried to shield him from lepers on the side of the road over there. But he was always, if he heard them, he's like, oh, wait a minute, I heard somebody over here. What do you want? Right? Slide. What is it? What is assimilation? What is assimilation? Oh, I probably should have waited to switch the slide. Now you can just read it. But try not to look and tell me, what is assimilation? Any Star Trek fans? You probably know what's assimilation. Right? What is it? One of those series they had those, what are they called, the Borgs or something like that?
Yeah.
And they like assimilate everybody or something. And then it was kind of weird. I didn't watch too many of those.
Resistance is futile.
I remember that phrase though from Stella. Resistance is futile. Mm-hmm. For assimilation. You know what? I think society rings that out to us every day. In the news, in the movies. Things are drummed into our heads. They want us to believe that resistance is futile. Now, there's a power stronger than Hollywood and the media. Resistance is not futile. So assimilation, being absorbed into a group to the point where you reflect their values, behaviors, and beliefs as your own. Are we called to assimilate? No. That's why we fought. That's why the Maccabees took up weapons, right? They were being forced to assimilate, and they wouldn't take it. What is syncretism? I think we have another slide.
Mm-hmm.
What is syncretism? A unity working together? I'm hearing something like that. Now? Okay, slide. The merging of various religions. Merging. It's more than just working together. It's like, okay, we'll follow Yeshua, but instead of celebrating that he died on Pesach, which we know is historical fact, we'll celebrate it after the first vernal equinox on whatever, right? Instead of, and we started merging, well, how are we going to celebrate it? Well, you know, when we used to worship Ishtar, we used to do X, Y, Z. Let's just do that. And we'll say that it's for this reason instead. There's a lot of syncretism today in religion. Look at Islam and Catholicism and different groups that are Unitarianism, right? Isn't that all about merging and becoming a one-world religion? Because, you know, after all wars, this is what's drummed into your head at university, right? All wars are really caused by religion. Didn't you know? Is that true?
No.
You know, historical fact, the last 100 years, where are the most deaths in this world of any time period, the last 100 years came from three regimes, really. Under Stalin, a communist atheist. He killed way more than Hitler, by the way. It's something like in the 30 millions. Yeah. Of course, Hitler was, you know, they were trying to create their own religion, actually, his regime. And indoctrinating the youth in that. A sort of a return to the paganism of old, which didn't actually exist. They were inventing it. The type that they were, you know, there was paganism, but not the sort that they were teaching their children. How many millions did Hitler kill? And then the worst of all is actually Chairman Mao. Over decades, there were many colossal failures in his regime, one of which, what was it called? I don't know what it's called. Just one of his little movements cost like 56 million people. Atheist, by the way. Nothing comes close. Well, maybe one religion comes a little close, but we won't talk about that. We won't talk about that. But not to atheism altogether, and within only 100 years. Now, there's no contest there. But this syncretism, this just merging different beliefs, it doesn't really matter how you worship God, right? Do it however you want. Does it really matter? Are there some things, is there a line somewhere? We have lines, right? We here, right? But you have to wonder about something. Do you have a line anywhere? Is there some line that if you cross it, you've gone too far? No, we're not called to syncretism, and we're not called to assimilation. Is it okay to cave under peer pressure? Sounds like an easy question. But do you cave under peer pressure? That's a rhetorical question. I don't want to know. I think sometimes you do. You need to think about it a little more, and maybe you'll come up with a time or two. Right? Hopefully less and less as you mature. Right? So we're not supposed to cave under peer pressure. We're not supposed to go into assimilation. We're not supposed to fall to syncretism. Do you have any scriptural support for your stance? Can you give me something?
Third commandment.
Anything. Give me something. I'm the guy on the street, and you're on the street with me, and you're telling me I shouldn't assimilate or I shouldn't get into syncretism. So tell me why. God said, don't worship me the way that pagans worship their gods.
And then he also says, worship me specifically this way.
And he says, worship me this way specifically. Yeah. It'd be nice if we could whip out some scriptures there to show him, like, so he could look for himself. But we got some principles, so that's good.
Right in number 30 is when Moses was going through what God was revealing to Moses what to tell him about how to tell them what to sacrifice at what time and what day.
Yeah.
So numbers 29 and 30 is the chapter.
28, 29 with the festivals.
Shavuot 20 verse 3, you are to have no other gods before me.
No other gods before me.
Yep.
Yeah. So, in Christian history, you would learn that over time they began to build their congregational buildings over top of the places where pagan temples had been built before, right? And they would sometimes adopt the practices of the pagans who were in that area because it was comfortable, it was familiar to the people. and they would tell them that it's okay that we do these things, just now the greenery means it represents life, right? For example, now the mistletoe means this, right? Now the rabbit means that, instead of what it used to mean. And they would say it's part of, I can't remember the name, I think it was like conquest narrative or something, where it's like the old days when the Babylonians, conquered the Assyrians, then the Assyrians are allowed to keep their gods, but they have to give them the Babylonian names, maybe. You're worshiping Tammuz, the Babylonian god now. You can worship him the same way as your god of war, god of thunder, whatever he was, right? You can worship him the same way, but his name is Tammuz now. Or, there were different ways it happened. Or you can keep your gods, but they're obviously weaker than ours, so you have to, because otherwise we wouldn't have conquered you. So you have to worship our gods too. Right? We think we don't live in a world like that anymore. Do you know when Christianity started conquering, when it became a Christendom, you know this term Christendom? Christendom is like kingdom of Christ. It's this merging of the political entity with the religion. And therefore the Caesar became like a representative of the Messiah. They started to war on people in northeastern Europe, and when they conquered them, they how many now they're Christian. When they went to the Crusades, right, to fight the Muslims because they were encroaching on the Holy Land and they were taking over the Holy Land, and they said, oh, they're attacking our brothers, our Christian brothers in the East, so it's a righteous cause to go fight them. Okay, I could kind of see that. But on the way, they stop and they say, oh, by the way, we're going to fight these infidels. There's some infidels around the corner there. Why don't we fight them first? And entire Jewish communities were wiped out. When they got to Jerusalem, they rounded up all the Jewish people, do you know this? Into the main synagogue in Jerusalem. And once they're inside, board the doors up, and they marched around the outside singing Onward Christian Soldier as they burned the synagogue down on those men, women, and children. Something went wrong somewhere, right? We just talked this morning about tens of thousands, many tens of thousands of Jewish believers in the first century in Jerusalem who were all zealous for the Torah and following Yeshua, filled with the Spirit, all this stuff, right? If those people were alive in medieval Spain during the time of the Inquisition, including the emissaries, including Kefa, including Stephan, they would have been burned at the stake. As a matter of fact, Yeshua himself followed the Torah. Yeshua himself ate kosher. If he was in medieval Spain under, Ferdinand and Isabella, they would have burned him at the stake. Something went wrong. Sometimes I have to wonder, groups that, the Jewish people, some of them are coming to Messiah, it's wonderful, it's great, and they should come and be one of us. It's like, there was a great rabbi in Russia, went on vacation to Israel. He was well known in his community, very upstanding person. Everybody looked up to him. He went to Jerusalem on a vacation, and he was sitting on the Mount of Olives. He was looking down at the temple, everything clicked or something. I don't know, vision, whatever. Somehow he sat on the Mount of Olives looking down at the Temple Mount, and he came to a realization that Yeshua is the Messiah. And he took it back to Russia with him. And he wasn't going to go to any Russian Orthodox church. He maintained his identity. And he went back and started spreading the news among other Jewish people in his community. He started one of the first Messianic congregations in the modern era, right? And he started to tour around Europe. He went to Germany, and the Lutherans wanted to turn him into a Lutheran. He went to England, and the Anglicans wanted to turn him into an Anglican. He went to Scotland, and the Presbyterians wanted to turn him into a Presbyterian. Dan Juster, one of the rabbis of the Messianic movement, one of the leaders, wrote a book, Irrevocable Calling. Irrevocable Calling. Does that sound familiar? The gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. There's a good many centuries that went by where people who call themselves the people of God looked at the Jewish people and said, no, not for you. Your calling is not irrevocable. I'm sorry. Only the ones God gave to us. Does that make sense? So in this book, at one point, because people have better rationale these days, it seems, at least they're free to speak their mind. At least now they're free to speak their mind because of Luther. Luther was anti-Semitic, but some good things came about because of his clash with authority, right? And I wasn't even going to talk about this. I don't know why. Maybe I should stop. Maybe this is too many. Maybe I'm stomping on toes too much. What do you think?
Keep going. Not my toes.
Not mine. People need to hear the truth.
Yeah.
The bottom line is this: we need to be able to share with people what it is that we actually believe. What is our stance? Why do we have that stance? Can we prove that stance? You need to be able to talk to each other. Like we talked about earlier, why were the emissaries supposed to wait in Jerusalem? They were supposed to wait for the Spirit. Why? What was the Spirit supposed to do for them? Give them power and give them the ability, the wisdom, the courage to be able to share the truth. Do you want to just, like the guy who's sick next to the pool and Yeshua comes by and has to ask him first, do you want to be healed? Do you want to share the good news? Or is it too scary? Right? Did that hurt? I mean, don't answer the question, right? It's rhetorical. But do you want to share the good news? Do you want the power of the Spirit to do? Do you want the wisdom that guides the courage? Someone said to me recently, reminding me of the scripture, right? If an earthly father, if you ask him for bread, does he give you a scorpion or something? How much more will the Father give you the Spirit if you ask? Because He's not an evil Father. An evil Father on earth wouldn't even do that. Wouldn't even, give you a scorpion or something. Here's a scorpion sandwich, son. No. No. How much better will our Father in heaven treat us? That's what Havdalah is all about. We recognize that we are called. And by the way, in this irrevocable calling book, he has a quote, because he's in this thing is, remember there was a Jerusalem council in Acts, right? And the Jerusalem council, what was it about? You know what it's about? It's about, Shaul's coming back, and there's all these Gentiles out there coming into the movement. What are we supposed to do with them? And this was actually, throughout Judaism, they were debating the same question. How are we supposed to treat Gentiles? What are we supposed to do with them? But within the Messianic movement, it was the same question. For over 1,000 years, the answer was, well, we make them into Jews, right? That's what we do, the whole way. You circumcise them at the end, and they say a statement. You know what the statement is? It comes from the book of Ruth. And an immersion. Council of Acts says, Kepha gets up and he says, you know what? Now that you brought it up, I had this little episode a while ago. I went to this Roman guy's house after I saw a vision God gave me. And I understood from this vision that I could eat ham sandwiches now. Oh wait, no, that wasn't the message. No. He says he understood what the message was. He couldn't understand the message, and then it clicked when he got to Cornelius' house. Oh, there's Gentiles in there. Don't call unclean what I've declared clean. Go with the guys who I sent to you. And they're Gentiles. Oh, I get it. What was he saying? Wow. Things had changed. Things had changed. God was already accepting these Gentiles who believed in him, who were God-fearers. Now, God-fearer is a person who was following the Torah, but they hadn't become Jewish yet. They hadn't, that last step. That's a God-fearer. Because as an adult, it's especially painful, right? Oh, I don't want to do that. And he's a Roman centurion, so he has to be ready to go to war. I don't know if I can really even take time to do that. What if something happens? That sort of thing. But God accepted him in that state already. So guess what? He didn't have to become Jewish. Now listen, this has to do with circumcision. That's it. When they go to the Jerusalem Council, and they say, Gentiles don't need to become Jewish. They don't need to be circumcised. This is the point. And then they say this little phrase at the end, right? That a lot of people want to ignore. Because the Torah is taught in the synagogues every week anyway. So what does that mean? Why even say that? What does that mean? Because there's a road of sanctification that they'll be on that. Where they'll learn the ways of God week by week. On Shabbat. It's interesting too, on Shabbat, right? That's true. Yeah, there was no change to Sunday until much later, really. All right. So Havdalah, the service at the end of Shabbat. We recognize we're called to be different. We may lose our family. Who's reading on our reading plan? Okay. So we read it this week. If you read the reading plan, you read it this week, right? In one of the Besorah, one of the Besorot, the Gospels. I think it was today or yesterday. We may lose our family. We may lose our homes. We may even lose our lives if we follow Yah faithfully. That's okay. Is it scary? It's scary, right? But it's okay. A lot of believers in the first century lost their lives, lost their families, lost their homes, lost their jobs, lost their reputations, lost their riches, Many of them were the Hebrew believers. It's part of what you're reading when you're reading the book of Hebrews. This is a community that had been persecuted before, and they're being persecuted again. They thought it was over. They're like, oh no, again? What? Some of them were ready to turn back. And they had to be strengthened. They had to be encouraged. And that's what the book is all about. Why is it okay? Because we recognize that our reward will be that much greater. Isn't that what he said, what we read this week? You will get that much more in the age to come. And in this life too, right? Some people think you're only a real believer if, if you're not rich, you're not, your faith isn't very strong. Some people preach that sort of a gospel today. If you're not rich, it's because you're not asking enough. You're not faithful enough if you're not rich. Let me ask you a question. How many of the emissaries of Yeshua died in their mansions of old age? How many of those guys who were lit on fire as human torches over the Roman emperor while he ate his dinner were unfaithful, do you think? How many of the people who teach that think about what they're saying in historical context? David I will not sacrifice something that cost me nothing. What will you sacrifice? What have you sacrificed? Are you even willing to sacrifice? It's a question we all have to ask. For the truth. Not for no reason, but for the truth. For following God wholeheartedly. Reward comes to those who overcome. Read Revelation. To those who overcome, say. To those who overcome, say. To those who overcome, say. To all these different congregations, to those who overcome, say. Don't tell me it's impossible to overcome. It's important to stay faithful. But how do we do it? How do we stay faithful? How do we stay faithful? Isn't that impossible? There are a lot of people who out there teaching you that it's impossible to stay faithful. Why do you want to try to stay faithful to God and obey Him? Don't you know that's impossible?
Not with the Holy Spirit.
Not with the Holy Spirit. We have a helper. And that's our helper. Slide. Second Peter 1:3. Is that familiar? To anyone? 2 Peter 1:3. You know, we think, if only I had a little more strength, if only I had a little more guidance or something, if only I had this, if only I had that, I could do better. God, if you could just, it's your fault, you know, you didn't give me, that's what you're really saying. It's your fault, you didn't give me, well, did He? Let's read 2 Peter 1:3. It says, God, say with me, God has given, that's past tense, right? Has given us everything we need for a godly life. Uh-oh. There go all the excuses, right? God has given us everything we need for a godly life. Isaiah 30, verse 21 says, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. When you try to turn to the right or when you try to turn to the left. You know, people are very into spirit guides these days. Spirit guides. Doesn't that sound cool? Spirit guide. Ooh, I want a spirit guide. Well, you know what? We have a spirit guide. We have a spirit guide as well. Ruach HaKodesh, the ultimate spirit guide. He's the one that's whispering in your ear when you start going the wrong way. No, this is the way. The highway of holiness. This is the way. Walk in it. Seek out, search out the ancient paths. Today, you know, we have history being rewritten. We have people saying there's no such thing really as morals. They're invented by people, and that's why they don't match from culture to culture and all these kind of things. There's no such thing as good and evil. Those are invented by people, and every other evil, sick thought you could think of is being pumped into children. It's interesting because, you know, those professors, if they went to sleep tonight and Denise went over and stole their car out of their driveway, they would wake up in the morning and they would know something evil happened here. Someone wronged me. Drug dealers, people who, you know, get by in this life by exploiting other people, right? Ugh. Bad, evil people. They know that it's evil, that it's wrong to steal. Don't believe me? Try to steal some of their drugs. They'll know. They know. It's interesting. So we know that there's a difference between right and wrong. We know there is a right way, and we're supposed to walk in it. We know we're not supposed to assimilate. We're not supposed to fall to syncretism. We're not supposed to be like Orpah and go part way and then just give up and walk away and go home. We're supposed to be more like Ruth. If you're a Gentile, you're being grafted in, be more like Ruth, not Orpah. Don't give up. Whatever the cost is, you're going to get that much more, right, as a reward. Isn't that what the scripture says? And the lesson of faith is for everyone, of course. So the way I want to end tonight, that woke a couple people up. The way I want to end tonight is actually with Havdalah. There's a connection. A connection of Shavuot with Havdalah. There were 3,000 people who were separated from the others on Shavuot. Just like you are separated now. Amen? So let's go ahead and close, but we're gonna close with Havdalah. So we're gonna walk outside with our Havdalah set it up, and it only takes a couple minutes, right? And a beautiful Havdalah ceremony, and then we'll go home. Okay? All right. Shalom.